Elle était très, très contente d'avoir pu réaliser son rêve d'acheter une maison en Irlande. Cette maison, c'était un refuge pour écrire et pour lire. Vraiment, elle avait une vie un peu trépidante de femme publique, puisqu'elle était mariée à un producteur dans le show business. Cette maison, ça représentait vraiment son rêve. Être chez elle, là où personne ne pouvait l'embêter, dans un calme absolu, son paradis.
But paradise was lost when the sanctuary that Sophie created became the location of our brutal death. Now our family must remember not only our spirit and our dreams here in Cork, but our murder too.
Ils avaient décidé de faire une veillée pour l'anniversaire des 10 ans de la mort de Sophie, sur place. Donc il y a des gens de la SOF de Paris qui étaient venus et organiser tout un voyage.
Au nom du Père et du Fils et du Saint-Esprit. Amen.
Et à ce moment-là, effectivement, l'église était remplie et systématiquement, tous les gens du voisinage venaient, tous les gens qui avaient croisé Sophie, les amis de Sophie, sur place.
Et venez nous embrasser, donner un peu de courage.
J'aurais rien fait pour ma fille.
If the murderer keeps living like everybody else, I will have done nothing for my daughter.
Each year up to now, Sophie's family have travelled to West Cork to remember her, but this year, George and Marguerite Bugnol have begun a new campaign, launching what they've called the Association for Truth about the murder of Sophie Toscan de Plantier. The new association says that despite the complexities of different legal systems in Europe, everyone should step back and recognise that victims' families have universal rights.
En 2007, on a décidé de créer la SOF. L'assassinat de Sophie a eu lieu en décembre 96. Et entre cette date et 2007, apparemment, la situation était bloquée. Je pense que les gens étaient très concernés par ce qui s'était passé. Et on essayait de comprendre un peu mieux le système irlandais. Nous, de vengeance contre une personne. Simplement, on estime que dans cette affaire, il y a eu beaucoup de bruit, une gestion assez chaotique, surtout de la part de la police irlandaise, et une paralysie due à l'attitude du procureur, et de créer quand même une logique de sortir quelques points forts qui vont dans le sens de la culpabilité de Bailey.
Juvenalis, the Roman satirist, is reported to have first asked and answered the question, quis custodit ipsos custodes? Who was there to guard the guardians but themselves? Indeed, for the first 64 years of their existence in the Irish police force, An Garda Síochána held a monopoly on both self-discipline and the investigation of complaints. The answer to the question of who now guards the guardians in relation to police forces in Ireland and other democratic states is the statutory police complaints authority, be it a board, commission, ombudsman, or hybrid variant, as is the case in Ireland. This was my master's thesis, which I received a 72% markage on, which is almost unheard of.
So, in 2012, 2 years after he got that law degree from Cork University, and 16 years after being accused of the murder of Sophie, Bailey lodged a complaint against the conduct of the murder investigation and began building his own civil case against the Irish state. The story or narrative that the Irish police tell differs significantly from the way Ian Bailey and Jules Thomas tell it.
Well, I was in a kind of quandary to a certain stage, just looking for somebody I could write to. You know, I was feeling the human rights were really violated. So I thought of writing to Mary Robinson. She was president. So I said, my name is Jules Thomas, partner to Ian Bailey. You may be aware of our case. Ian and myself have both been arrested twice and taken for 12 hours questioning by detectives at Bandon Garda Station. No charge has been made.
The fucking damage that these did to our lives, and these fuckers in guard blue fucking uniforms went around, and this is provable if you check with the DPP's 2001 critique. He talks about it. They went around telling everybody, have no doubt. And if anybody actually was saying, hang on a second, I know Ian Bailey for a long while now, he might be a bit of a bollocks, he might be this, he's a bad poet, but I don't believe he'd murdered this woman. The guards became actively hostile to that point of view. So we took on the state of Ireland in a civil action. I wouldn't say I'm sick and tired of banging on and complaining, but I've done everything I could within my bailiwick over the period of 22 years to try to do whatever I could to clear my name or to highlight the shenanigans that have gone on. Actually, apparently, I've been accused of not protesting my innocence enough. Well, that's a lot of bollocks.
The libel case, it was admitted in court that the guards had actually fed information to the newspapers, trying to perpetuate the idea that Ian was the murderer. The admittance in open court that the newspapers had been fed this information by the guards, that was enough for us to say, right, these are the people we can now attack. Anyway.
Ian Bailey and his partner Jules Thomas arriving at court this morning with Mr. Bailey's solicitor for the start of his action against the state. The court was told he claims he was wrongfully arrested in relation to the murder of French filmmaker Sophie Toscan du Plantier. His lawyers told the court he will allege that Gardaí told everyone in the community that he was guilty and that as a result his life has been a misery for the last 18 years.
He said this was not just a case for damages, it was for the jury to look at the Garda investigation and decide if this was how it should have been conducted by the people we entrust to uphold the law. The state denies all the claims.
They denied everything, actually. Just flat denial was their modus operandi.
Warnings issued by the Gardaí as to the alleged danger presented by Bailey to the community. In a report submitted to this office on 26th of February 1997, for the purpose of a consultation, the Gardaí stated the following. 1. It is the utmost importance that Bailey be charged immediately with this murder, as there is every possibility he will kill again.
Well, they said this to the DPP. I mean, they didn't make any bones about it. They said we need an immediate arrest because this man will kill again. So it wasn't just to witnesses they said this. They said it to the DPP.
After a certain point, they just were harassing us. Like, they didn't have any new more questions to ask, and we didn't have anything more to add. We didn't think he'd done it. The guards are saying, we know he did it. We know he did it. I mean, how appalling is that? Like, lots of people would believe the guards.
We got an awful lot of hassle over tactics to try and find out this and that, but people that are very close to the suspect or the criminal or whatever, they're the people that you must talk to. We'd have a wonderful world if you went out to some fella and said, John, I understand you were there the other night when such a fella killed somebody or murdered some fella. Oh, he said yes, and I'll take a statement from you. That's cuckoo land. You may have to go 10 times to the one witness to get him to tell the truth.
Their friends fell away because every time that they were meeting with friends and stuff like that, the guards would call around the next day and want like a full interview with people and not leave people alone, actually. It was quite cruel.
The guards went round to them and pestered them. constantly, so much that they stopped coming near us. I mean, quite heartbreaking losing some friends.
I think there were certain people who will always believe that Gardaí were corrupt in this. For Ian's civil action against the state for wrongful arrest, what he could bring to the case was limited enough from his own experience. The really critical witness for him in terms of Garda wrongdoing was Mary Farrell.
So, Marie, you were driving here from Goleen to Skull.
That's
and
right.
You were driving.
Yes.
And there was a passenger, somebody where I am, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. And you were driving along here and you'd seen no cars. And then in your headlights coming up towards the bridge, here at this turn,
Yep.
you saw somebody.
There was a man just here.
So we'll just pull in
Just
here. Yeah. Okay, so you know this is the turn to Sophie's.
No, I didn't know that.
The only place he could be coming from was Sophie's or some house up this way.
Okay.
But he could have been just a drunk,
He could have been, yeah,
you know? But you think it was the man that was outside your shop?
definitely, yeah. I can still see him. I can still see him across the road from the shop, even though now it's, what, nearly 24 years later. Nearly like Middle Eastern colouring.
It's amazing to me that the police didn't draw an identikit of this guy.
Yeah, no, they never asked to do that. It was like they had their man, but they had to build a case around him.
The person that she said she saw was described as being about 5'8", 5'9" in height. And over subsequent statements to the Gardaí, that person's height went from 5'8", 5'9", to 5'10", 6 foot, to someone being very tall. And what's significant about that is Ian Bailey is, I think, 6'3". He's a very tall man. And anyone who would see Ian Bailey could not confuse him for standing at 5'8".
Tanned, sallow-skinned.
Tanned, sallow skin, a long, thin face. This description by Marie Farrell in her very first statement of the man outside her shop is what alerted the DPP to the contradictions in her statements. But the police understanding that Ian Bailey was the man in the long black coat meant this man was never investigated.
The libel trial, Marie Farrell had dramatically stated at one point that she thought in her own head, when being confronted by the chief suspect, that Ian Bailey could kill me in 2 minutes. And so this was a woman completely living in fear. Fast forward to the end of 2005, and a sensational turn of events. Marie Farrell announcing that she was retracting her evidence about seeing a man at Cale Fodder Bridge and that that man was Ian Bailey. And furthermore, Ian Bailey had never intimidated her. A complete reversal that extended into saying that the real intimidators in the case were the Gardaí.
She rang, I'm on the phone. Hello, who's this? Don't you know me? And I just didn't pick up the name right away. And I said, no, who's this? And she said, well, I'm the woman who gave evidence against Ian Bailey. And I was saying, which one? And she says, the woman, like, who was that? And I says, I can't talk to you. That was my immediate reaction. You're a state witness. You can't be ringing me. You're sort of one of them. And she said, no. I want to tell you the truth. And I said, okay.
Okay, let's get this out of the way. The inference is that you changed your opinion because you'd go to a case against the state, Bailey would be paid a load of money and you'd get half it.
I don't know where that came from. There was nothing for me to gain by changing my statements or my story. The only thing was I thought it was time to tell the truth and stand up to the guards. Got a phone call from the Garda inspector and he told me that Sophie's parents were going to take a case, a civil action against Ian Bailey. And there would be another court case and I'd have to go to court again. And I told him that I would never, ever again go to court for the guards and tell lies. I did benefit from, you know, doing whatever the guards wanted me to do.
Did you think Bailey did it?
They told me he did it. And at the time I did believe them, but then I started thinking,
If he did do it, why do they need to manufacture all of this stuff around him?
Marie Farrell said she had two lives, one with the Gardaí and what she would do for them, and her other normal life. She knew she should not have done so, but she felt she had to go along with it because the guards had done her a lot of favours. They had promised not to tell her husband she was out with another man. They also took care of a prosecution for no insurance against her husband and offered help with an application for a council house. She said she was told they needed her help to build up a profile of Ian Bailey as a dangerous and threatening person so the DPP would charge him.
There were all types of allegations made for about 4 or 5 years before the trial came up in the High Court. And you know, the funny thing, I went back over them all. Very few, if any, of them were substantiated in any shape or form. And when the pressure came on the other crowd, they couldn't prove anything.
Marie Farrell was used in the libel trials as being the bolster for the state. Her evidence was to be absolutely believed and believable. And in the next trial, she's then presented as being a person you could never believe. And that she's wholly unbelievable.
And then it follows, why should we believe you now, Marie Farrell, if you have shown yourself capable of telling a welter of untruths in sworn evidence?
Counsel for Mr Bailey, Tom Creed, said the case was not about the credibility of Marie Farrell, but about the credibility of the Gardaí. She had been squashed like a fly when she turned on the state, but despite this had come to court voluntarily because in the end she wanted to do right by Ian Bailey.
It was hard to understand the tactics of the defence questioning a self-confessed perjurer in the stand for 9 days to prove that she was a liar.
Oh, I was destroyed. And I remember driving home one night from the train station. And I thought, will I keep driving to Ruski and drive into the Shannon? Because I can't take any more of him.
We were now at a position where it's impossible to know what to believe. They had no scientific or forensic evidence to link Ian Bailey to the scene. So after that, it becomes a circumstantial case. And the only circumstantial evidence really was the Kailfada Bridge testimony, which has been the focus of so much controversy over the years that really no one knows at this point what, if anything, was seen at Kailfada Bridge.
Welcome to my world. All the time I've hoped when I've been before the Irish judiciary, all the time, every time, I've hoped and given them the benefit of the doubt and just believed in something called justice. And you know what I've got? Nothing but injustice. I didn't know it was going to for 64 days. They said it would be over in a month, 6 weeks. I think they ran it for so long just to try to wear me out and wear down my team of lawyers and people. And they almost did. They almost wore me out. I had to separate myself from myself. This might sound very strange, to deal with it. I just made sure that my hair was good, I was wearing nice clothes and my teeth were cleaned and didn't have any hairs coming out my ears.
Ian Bailey said while it was tough, he wanted to clear his name and prove once and for all he had nothing to do with the murder of Miss Duplantier.
At 64 days, the action that Ian Bailey took in the Irish High Court was the longest-running civil case in Irish legal history. Ian Bailey himself spent 10 days in the stand, and 4 days were taken up by the testimony of Martin Graham, who came into contact with Ian the day after his first arrest.
Mr. Graham maintained that the Gardaí tried to get him to get close to Ian Bailey to see could he overhear some type of incriminating conversation. And Mr. Graham claimed as a reward for doing that, or to enable him to do that, he would be supplied with cash, clothing, and most interesting of all, drugs.
Martin Graham told the court he was given cash, cannabis and clothes to befriend Ian Bailey and get information linking him to the murder of Sophie Toscan du Plantier.
But he didn't like the idea of, as he said, of being a rat, of being an informer. And eventually Mr. Bailey learned about this Garda approach.
He came round and he said, actually, the guards have given me some money to get you drunk. And so you admit it. We said, God, that's funny, isn't it? So he was actually a double agent. He told us exactly what was going on with the guards.
The court heard Mr. Graham rang the newspaper, who sent a reporter and photographer to meet him. He was to meet Gardaí, get cannabis and tape the meeting.
He answered the ad from the Sunday World. If you have the story, tell us. And he said to Dublin, yeah, I've got this story. I want 1,000, I want a ticket out of the country. And they said, OK, we've got Ken and Billy down in Cork. Ken's staff, Billy's photographer, send him off together down there.
They asked me to try and familiarise myself with Ian Bailey and get to know the man. And hopefully Ian would confess the whole crime to me. Well, since that time, I've received about £500 to £600 in payoffs. They've bought clothes for me, as well as provided about 15 to 18 ounces of hash.
But the next day, Ken told me that Dublin decided they were not going to pay Martin his 1,000, and he wasn't getting a ticket. And I said, well, guys, this is bad. He is now in West Cork, and the shit will hit the fan for him.
By May 1997, he said the Gardaí smelled a rat. He said he knew he had been rumbled. He said he knew he'd caught policemen being corrupt and that their pensions and livelihoods were at stake. He said he was driven around for about 45 minutes. He said they kept digging him in the back and asking him where were the tape recordings. Mr. Graham broke down as he said his life was threatened.
Gardaí denied all wrongdoing with regard to Martin Graham, and the defence team tried to discredit his allegations. However, his strange version of events did seem to be supported by an actual phone call with a policeman. The Bandon tape scandal broke in December 2013. In police stations all across the country, the Gardaí had been recording telephone conversations. This was both secret and illegal, and it was happening from the early 1980s. The Bandon tapes were just one of many police scandals that were exposed at the time. This resulted in the resignation of the Garda Commissioner. A lot of the calls in Bandon were about Sophie's murder, including conversations with Marie Farrell and Martin Graham.
Hello, it's Martin speaking. I left a number of messages there yesterday, Martin. Yeah. Do you want to meet or something? During the week. Yeah, whenever. Right. And then Martin, you wouldn't, the only thing is, you're probably looking for something big monetary-wise for making a statement, would you?
Will he be wanting a monetary reward for making a statement? After hearing the Bandon tapes, the part involving Martin Graham became irrelevant, when in a sensational development at the last hour, the defence raised a statute of limitations.
The judge ruled he hadn't lodged his legal action within the 6-year time limit required by law.
And the Director of Public Prosecution's report criticising Garda conduct and dismissing the police case against Bailey was not admitted into evidence.
He had sued for wrongful arrest and made several other related claims. The bulk of his claims were struck out. And so the questions for the jury were reduced to the central plank of this case. Did Gardaí conspire to implicate Mr. Bailey by taking statements from the witness Marie Farrell, knowing them to be false? And did Gardaí later conspire to take statements from the same witness alleging intimidation?
I would have said that we had generated a huge amount of evidence to achieve our objectives. All of that was directed by the judge to the jury not to be considered. And after, I think, about 60 days of hearing, being told, look, folks, all you've got to decide now is which version would you prefer of this very, very discrete element, namely the police and what they're telling you about Marie Farrell, or Marie Farrell telling you what she's telling you about the police, I'd say that they must have come out, having been given this direction, and thinking, well, what was all that other stuff about?
Just after 4 o'clock today, they replied no to both questions.
I can't say anything at the moment, sorry.
Having lost his case, he now faces a possible legal bill of millions of euro.
This has been very much presented as two mutually exclusive possibilities. Corrupt Gardaí, innocent Ian Bailey, or non-corrupt Gardaí, guilty Ian Bailey. And the two aren't actually mutually exclusive. Say Gardaí did behave in less than proper fashion. Does that mean that they had the wrong man?
Ian Bailey took his action on the basis of wrongful arrest, and the High Court, in a very convoluted way, found that there wasn't a suggestion of a conspiracy. They found no evidence of a conspiracy. There was no evidence of wrongful arrest on the basis of the Garda actions based on the information that they had at the time. But certainly in terms of the mistakes that were made and the consequences of those mistakes, there's no point saying the Sophie Toscan de Plantier investigation has not been damaging for the Gardaí. It was quite damaging.
I saw Ian Bailey on the television programme. He spoke very well and he told his story, how the guards were doing him. I was sitting at home. The public of Ireland were being told that this is what happened. The guards were getting near desperate doing it. And you'll always meet a certain amount of gullible people that will believe that. Whew. The damage is done. Now, it was the same with a lot of allegations. Media, in television, the radio, magazines. You mentioned it. It was everywhere, talking about this case, and it was very hard to live with that. People would be thinking about it and saying, geez, I wonder would there be a bit of truth now and that, and could he have done that, and all that. But you're powerless, and a witness can go into court and say anything they like about you when they're giving evidence. And you can do nothing about it. They can tell all the lies they like about you. Privileged. They were giving evidence in court, and it's privileged.
A whole generation has grown up, and this has been hanging over West Cork. Have no doubt, it's that bollocks Bailey. And people say to me, you know, Ian, so-and-so came up to me and said, do you think he did it? So it's left a really big question mark.
Actually, this process, this decanting, which is, going on, is very cathartic.
I've lost my cases against the state. We were never going to win those. And I've learned recently that I'm going to be lumbered with an approximate costs bill of the Irish state of some €7 million. And strangely enough, that's the least of my worries. Because apparently on the 24th of May, I am going to be tried in France for murder. And I'm not intending to offer myself up because I have no faith at all in the French legal system, and I know that the material which is going to be used to prosecute me is based on a falsity.
I've no alibi. I'm so bad I cry.
Are you filming all of this? I won't mind a private moment to just have a... But...
I talk shy.
Oh, God. Anyway, you don't need to play it all out, but... Damon Dempsey, I've got into him. So I'm going to turn it off, actually, for now. But,
He's very good, Damon.
I just liked it, I've got no alibi, and I talk shy. Anyway, I was listening to it last night, and I thought, Jesus, that is so spot on in terms of alibi, You can tell state of the mind of a writer by the state of his desk. Nobody knows how you're going to be able to handle a thing. You hope you're going to be able to handle it. You hope you're going to be tough enough. You can tell yourself you're in a, you know, a John Wayne state of mind or whatever, but you just don't know how you're going to handle it. And I just hope and pray that I can. I can't imagine that it can in any way be good. You know?
I think Ian is a bit hyper because he's dealing with the French case imminence the best way he can, and is just being really as creative as he can to block it out. I mean, in the past we did it with a lot of gardening, and he actually dug the ponds and, you know, did loads of the hard labour around the place, building stone walls and everything, and I was just busy planting, and so we kept ourselves so busy and got so exhausted we didn't have time to think about other things.
Do you think he's using alcohol to block out reality?
Oh, without a doubt he uses that as well, which isn't really going to help. He's going to crash any minute. I hope he doesn't, but I think he might. He's his own person, you know. We both do our own thing. We're not trying to control each other. There's no way I could control him and vice versa.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Miss Thomas. Happy birthday, Miss Thomas. Oh, happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
The reason we're here this evening is to celebrate Miss Catherine Julia Thomas's inception from David and Beryl. See, I'm trying to re-romance me missus, but it's an uphill struggle.
He was doing very well when he was on AA. It is upsetting. He was much better off when he was getting support.
You're winning. I don't know if I'm winning, but I'm in a John Wayne state of mind. And you're looking lovely, lady. See, I was a journalist, and I schmoozed with the lowest of the low and the highest of the high. Diana, Princess Diana, always had an eye for me. And on the topic of, because I'm getting...
Well, when we turned up and I saw him lashing into pints already, I thought, oh God, it's 5 in the afternoon. He's well, I could just tell from his stand.
Have I told you lately I love you?
It's like he's performing all the time. You know, he's loving an audience, and he's not quite being himself. He's over the top. You know, it's sort of annoying at times for me.
That's what you do.
I mean, I'm the opposite end of the scale, so I'm not the best judge. I hate attention.
My sadness, my troubles, that's what you do. For Jules.
It was his night, I know that. Le centre of attention. Doesn't get it. I'm sure he doesn't get it. Doesn't see what he's like. It's not fair on me, is it, really, putting up with it? And I have told him he can choose between me or alcohol. Doesn't seem to make any difference. And I can't kick him out. There's nowhere he could go. You know, if I did kick him out, he'd literally be homeless. Such ghastly times, you don't walk out on someone in the middle of ghastly times anyway. I think that would be completely against my nature to do that.
Yeah, it's a funny position. I mean, halfway between the doghouse and the jailhouse.
I still have a I have love for her.
you know? And it's very confused as well because nobody's ever been through what we've been through. Nobody. If I could do anything, if I could change anything, I would. Could I have done anything to change it? The only thing I could have done, might have changed it, if I'd have been either in hospital, incapacitated, or away from West Cork on a certain day in December 1996. Fuckers. No, I mean, they haven't ruined my life, but they've ruined Jules's life. Sorry. Oh.
When I look at or listen to the police talking about DNA and, oh, back then DNA wasn't as good as it is now, I kind of go, well, the most primitive DNA are our fingerprints. When I was a child in the womb, I reached out to touch my mother's stomach, just like every human since the beginning of time. And by reaching out to touch her, I created, on the tops of my fingers, ridges. And now I have a fingerprint. So the police, when they suspected Ian Bailey, they did take his fingerprints when they arrested him, and we never got the report of that. And I was always looking to find out in the police statements that I got from Frank Buttimer. I couldn't find him in the libel trial. I couldn't find him in the civil trial. And then I went to the French file, and I found this report from the forensics, John O'Neill. And what he basically says is that Ian Bailey's fingerprints were nowhere to be seen. But he does say there were other marks there. So the question is, are there marks there that if we found another suspect, could we put them at the scene of the crime? This seems of fundamental importance to me. At the scene of the crime, even if I'm not here, that will remain.
We subsequently learned that at the outset, there were 50 suspects. Seems that the police managed to reduce the number of suspects right down to 1 in not more than 2 weeks. Ian Bailey became the only show in town.
The most interesting statement that I had never seen before and wasn't included in the DPP's file was a statement by a driver who was living in Goleen at the time, who says on Monday the 23rd of December 1996, he leaves his home in Goleen, he's driving up to Cork. So this is around about 7:30 on that Monday morning, okay? A car comes right up behind him and overtakes him on the hairpin bend. And he has to swerve to pull out. So on the Tuesday, the guards go into Goleen and go do house to house, knocking on the doors and can anybody help? Have you seen anything? And he says, yeah, actually, 7:30 yesterday morning, I was overtaken at very high speed by a blue Ford Fiesta. I think it might have had red number plates. Now, the funny thing is, I hadn't seen that statement until I found it in the boxes of discovery. It wasn't included in the DPP's file. In other words, it wasn't sent to the fucking DPP. After the murder, the guards are appealing for anybody with information.
Inquiries are still continuing, and we are doing house-to-house visits. We're getting a great response from the public, and I would like to thank them for it. But there's always something out there that we don't know of, and could be of immense help to us.
They're appealing for drivers and cars, certain cars that were seen, to come forward. There's no fucking appeal for a blue Ford fucking Fiesta, is there? Driving away from the scene at 7:30 in the morning. And as soon as I saw that statement, I wasn't able to categorically rule out the unknown identity of the driver as having been the culprit who murdered her. So this is 7:30. Now, if you go through the statements and you see this, hello, don't come in. Oh, well, no, come in, come in. Sorry. Come in if you want, but let me know.
So they do an appeal for, like, and there's no appeal for anybody who's seen a blue Ford Fiesta. What's that all about, eh?
Les soupçons se concentrent rapidement sur Ian Bailey, un journaliste qui habite à proximité et apparaît le lendemain du meurtre avec le visage griffé.
In 2008, the French state applied to the Irish state for what they call mutual assistance to give the French the Irish police file. The Minister for Justice directs that it is appropriate and orders the files to go out. Now, that became then the material, of course, which was rejected by the DPP, but which was relied upon by the French in their eventual application for extradition to the French court system.
They exhumed Sophie's body in France. They conducted a battery of new forensic tests. Crucially, they were given access to the Garda murder file. And that was, I think, probably the greatest acknowledgement that there was never going to be any action in Ireland, because had there been even the remotest prospect of something happening in Ireland, that wouldn't have happened. They were eventually given permission to send detectives, French detectives, to Ireland to re-interview investigating officers in the Gardaí, but also some of the witnesses in the original murder investigation.
Normalement, c'est ma grand-mère qui parle, mais là, depuis 2-3 ans, j'ai pris l'habitude de dire quelques mots. Déjà des mots différents, parce que finalement, ça s'est passé il y a 22 ans. Je suis certainement encore la seule personne qui retourne sur place régulièrement. Donc, j'y suis retourné 2 fois cette année. Et pour vous, c'est quelque chose, peut-être, c'est présent dans vos cœurs, c'est présent dans votre tête, mais pour moi, pour mes tout proches, c'est présent dans le quotidien. Dans le quotidien.
Pierre-Louis a toujours été finalement très solide. Alors aujourd'hui, c'est un adulte, il est marié, il a 2 enfants superbes. Il est solide pour affronter le procès d'assises qui sera certainement une épreuve difficile. Mais aujourd'hui, je suis convaincu qu'il est prêt. C'est clair que au début, il fallait qu'il soit protégé, qu'il puisse rentrer dans la vie. Avec le moins de marques possible.
Oh. I am so sorry for the family as well. And they really, really believe Ian did it. What can I say?
Sophie Toscan-du-Plantier's son Pierre-Louis and her brother Bertrand spent this weekend at the West Cork holiday home where she stayed and where she died.
What are we, Sunday the 19th of May? And, God, where would you start? Well, I'm here at the market. I'm trying to carry on doing everything that I normally would do. What's happening today is that Pierre-Louis, the son of the victim, is going to make an impassioned plea for the good people of West Cork who are required as witnesses in Paris to travel over so that they can get rid of this devil that lives amongst them. And it's very, very, very surreal, unreal. It is frightening.
Dear friends, these are not just a few words to tell you that in France, in 2 weeks' time, the trial of the man accused of killing my mother will begin at last. You know as well as I know who killed my mother, the man who lives among you. I am in prison because he is free, and yet I still come back every year. For 23 years, I've trusted you Don't betray me. Don't betray yourself.
In a way, my speech here was also an appeal to all the witnesses which are requested to come in France and to come and testify against the suspect.
Last week I had this feeling of sickness right in the pit of my stomach. Really, really fucking visceral. And that sort of comes and goes. The file that the French were acting under was the file that was rejected here numerous times in Ireland and was corrupted. Many of the statements withdrawn or discredited, and all of that shit was handed over to the French.
They think they've got all the evidence they need. We've seen it because we put an appeal in. Our French barrister says there's no way you could fight it. Would be a waste of my time, he said, and your money. Because hearsay in French law stands as evidence. So if somebody says, oh, he said he did it, that's enough for them.
It's very difficult to say, but I just can't see any set of circumstances where Ireland will extradite an individual to France on foot of a conviction in France for a crime that happened in Ireland and for a matter which the Director of Public Prosecutions found that the same individual shouldn't even be charged, let alone tried. But the one thing I've learned about this case is you don't make predictions, because it's one of those cases where you really don't know what's coming down the tracks.